What did we learn from the New York Giants' two joint practices with the New York Jets? Locked on Giants starts right now.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traynor, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. And we thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And joining me on today's Locked On Giants podcast, speaking of New York Giants on SI, is Brandon Olsen, who is also the host of Locked On Gators. And Brandon has been with me the last couple of days covering the New York Giants joint practices with the Jets. Just makes it easier. I'm able to stand on one field and watch one field. He stands on the other, and then we compare notes at the end of the day. Brandon, my friend, long time no see, huh?
Yeah, it's been a whole 7 hours. Long time.
That long, huh? Wow.
Yeah.
Time flies, huh? Anyway, we have a lot to go
when the season's coming close.
We have a lot to go through today anyway. We're going to talk about basically day two. We'll run down what, our observations from day two. Now, I was watching the Giants defense versus the Jets offense today. Brandon was watching the Giants offense versus the Jet defense. The Jets defense, I think, was missing Sauce Gardner. Then we'll talk about, individual standouts and then any concerns that we might have had from the 2 days. So we got a lot to cover. Brandon, let's get into it. You were watching the Giants offense. Now, on day one, the Giants offense had its share of struggles. It was not a very good day. What did you think of the offensive performance overall?
I didn't think it was great, but I did think it was much improved from day one. I thought that we saw more support from the offensive line, which there were still issues over there, but that's to be expected. Andrew Thomas is still out, and you also had Jermaine Illuminor missed Wednesday's practice with the birth of his child. So you had backup tackles at every single play. You had backup offensive tackles in there. And so I think that it's fair to expect maybe not perfect performances. It was incredibly chippy throughout the entire practice. I've never seen two teams that aren't year in, year out regular season rivals that hate each other the way that these two teams seem to hate each other. But I'm also here for it. I fully support it. I'm a generational hater, and so I like seeing the hate like that. But I do think that the offense, they looked better on the second day than the first day. Offensive line looked more comfortable. Russell Wilson, Jackson Dart, Jameis Winston all looked pretty comfortable. I think that there was one play where Jameis Winston hit Dalen Cambry for a wide open touchdown deep down the right sideline. And that kind of felt like a turning point for the entire offense for the Giants. It kind of just felt like all of a sudden then Russell Wilson started taking deep shots and Jackson Dart started taking deep shots. And so I feel like that was kind of a turning point in terms of just loosening up everybody. And I think once you saw that, you saw people get loose, get open. And we also got to see Russell Wilson and Jackson Dart both run in touchdowns on read options, led by tight ends, and that was just fun to see. Just because both times it was red zone, second play for Russell Wilson, rushing touchdown on the read option, second play for Jackson Dart, rushing touchdown for him on the read option. So that was just a fun little thing where they brought it out on the second play both times, scored touchdowns both times.
Now, on today's practice, I think both sides focused more on the run. And it was really, a good time to do that because the Giants got back Evan Neal, who played guard. They also had, obviously, Marcus Bowe, who they put in at right tackle with Illuminor missing. What did you see from the Giants running game, particularly the blocking and Evan Neal?
I will say that area wasn't super stoked to watch them there. It just seemed like they kind of it didn't even seem like they were getting beat consistently. It kind of just seemed like they weren't really in sync as a unit, which is I think annoying to watch because we're close enough to the season now where that should probably be sifted through for the most part. But also, I think that one thing that always sticks with me from 2024's preseason with Andrew Thomas was him talking about how just one person changing on the offensive line, just one personnel change there, changes a lot for the offensive line. It changes how everybody moves. And so when you don't have Andrew Thomas and you don't have Jermaine Illuminor, it makes sense to me that they look specifically out of sync at that point. It makes a lot of sense. And so it was annoying, not very concerning, just because it seemed like guys were winning their battles. It just kind of seemed like they were winning them at different times of the play, and things were just it was just chaos at that point. It wasn't like they were getting blown off the ball. It was just sloppy.
Yeah. Not very many. I don't think there were a whole lot of big plays from the offensive side. You mentioned the chippiness, and going back to day one of the joint practices. I mean, I was watching the offense, and I just thought they were very sloppy. Just before we turn the page and we go to the defensive side, there were some one-on-ones. How did the Giants' offensive line do against the Jets' defensive players in the one-on-ones?
I feel like when you watch the first team for both teams go at it, the first go around, the Jets defensive linemen won it more often than not. And then the second go around, it kind of seemed like the Giants offensive linemen were winning it. And so it seemed like a very balanced battle there. And I do think that one-on-ones generally in the trenches, defensive linemen have the advantage there, because it's very rare for an offensive lineman to actually just on a play-to-play basis be completely on your own on an island. And so I do think that favors defensive linemen. So it was promising to see defensive linemen win it early, and then offensive linemen for the Giants come back and win it the next go around. Marcus Mbow is one specifically where he lost bad on an inside move his first time around, and then he stonewalled after that. And Evan Neal looked pretty good. One guy, or actually two guys that I think did struggle in those one-on-ones, which wasn't very surprising to me, were John Michael Schmitz and Austin Schlottman. They both struggled a little bit there on the interior. Again, not surprising, especially John Michael Schmitz. He's not a guy that's supposed to be on an island. He's supposed to be more of a helping hand wherever he's needed. And so to watch him lose those one-on-one reps, it wasn't surprising, is still disappointing, but I'll be just completely honest. Watching Marcus Mbow come back from losing a rep, again, pretty ugly the first time around, watching him come back from that was very exciting to see a young guy take that next step in real time. That's always something where you don't even need to go back to the film and see it. You can just know in real time and learn in real time. And that's just an impressive trait to have, in my opinion.
Now, did they do like what we saw with the defense going against the Jets offensive line? Did they do stunts and twists?
Very little. I think they did one go around each time. And that was it. We did start seeing just two guys rushing at the same time without stunting or twisting. So it did seem like they were kind of just trying to get multiple guys out there at once and kind of making it more of a legitimate simulated trench battle, I guess. But they did run a couple of stunts. Mostly it was just the one-on-one stuff, and the stunts, Giants were inconsistent, which is something that I feel like for as long as I've been alive, the Giants have been inconsistent at handling those. But yeah, they stopped some, which I will say is at least something positive, but it was a tough day in that area. And again, considering how out of sync they seemed with the personnel changes, not surprising.
All right. We're talking with Brandon Olsen, who was with me covering the 2-day Giants-Jets mini joint practices. Coming up, we're going to talk about the other side of the ball. I had the Giants defense versus the Jets offense. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then, of course, the two teams merged together at the end for a 1-minute tied game scenario, getting to the end zone type of deal. So we'll talk about that right after this. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, I'm playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first timer or a veteran making your millionth league. Whether you're all in on something new, or you like sticking to head leagues, or jumping into public leagues, Yahoo has you covered. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout the month of August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the perfect time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues, or you can join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, with Brandon Olsen of Locked On Gators, but he's also part of New York Giants on SI. He was with me for the 2 days of the joint practices, so a lot went down. And Brandon, we're going to talk now about the defense, the Giants defense. And I saw, today, you saw the defense yesterday. I saw them today. Primarily, they worked on run defense. And I have to say, I was pretty happy with what I saw with the run defense. I saw, Dexter Lawrence got a few snaps in there. And of course, nobody's going to run against Dexter Lawrence, but particularly against the tackles, I thought the Giants were really stout with the run defense. When you saw them on day one of the joint practices, did you see the same thing?
Yes, I did. Kayvon Thibodeau looked damn good. I'll say that one. I'll say he looked really good defending the run on Tuesday against the Jets. He made some solid plays. I remember there was one specifically where he was just hunting Braylon Allen, it seemed like, along the whole edge until they went all the way out of bounds. He chased him completely to the sideline. And yeah, Kayvon he looks more engaged against the run right now.
Yeah, definitely. And, let's talk real quick about the pass rush. OMG. I mean, is that still a thing now? I mean, Brian Burns was absolutely living in the Jets backfield. I mean, he was beating guys left, right, and center. Abdul Carter, another one who was getting pressure. Kayvon Thibodeau brought pressure. We saw some creative blitzes from Shane Bowen. I don't recall seeing a whole lot of last year. We saw there was a corner blitz from the slot. I think, I'm trying to remember, was it Dane Belton or Drew Phillips? I can't remember, but it was coming from the slot. I can't remember which guy they had. We saw Micah McFadden come in. So, Bowen trying some different things with some different blitzes. What was your takeaway when you saw that, day one, and then what you saw at the end of the practice?
I mean, for day one, there were a lot of exotic looks as well, which I do think that you see that in year two. And I think in the spring, Shane Bowen even mentioned it, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm not mistaken, it was the spring, where he mentioned, year one, you kind of lay the foundation of the defense and you just learn how to play defense. And year two, you can kind of get more creative with how you generate a pass rush and how you get more exotic with things. And I do think that we're seeing them try things and try to see what works. I remember on Tuesday, they had a play where they put 7 guys just all on the line of scrimmage, some with their hand in the dirt, some standing up, but 7 guys all on the line of scrimmage. And they blitzed them all. I was like, okay, someone's going to drop back. And they sent them all. And I don't know if someone was supposed to drop back, but the Jets did quickly get out of it with just a dump off to the running back. But just bringing up these new packages and these new looks, it's exciting to see. Looking at how they use Abdul Carter is never going to get old. It's like walking near Dexter Lawrence. Every time I see him, I'm just like, oh, that's being next to someone that size is never going to get old. Watching a person of Abdul Carter's size move in the way that he moves and be used in those ways, never going to get old. I watched him line up in the slot yesterday and cover someone out of there. And so it's just very impressive to watch how they're moving and how they're operating and functioning. I do think that on Tuesday we saw quite a few times where coverage breakdowns and it seemed like they weren't really certain what they were supposed to be doing. But as far as getting more creative, they're doing that. And it's just a matter of properly executing once you get comfortable. But the only way to learn how to do it is to go out there and do it.
And speaking of, trying different things, one thing we saw today on day 2 of the joint practices, Shane Bowen had Paulson Adebo travel with Garrett Wilson. Now, we have not seen that. Paulson Adebo, I believe, has played most of his career, I want to say, on the left side, left cornerback. And that was a concern I know that I had, because I was like, okay, if they're going to play sides, that if I'm the opposing offensive coordinator, I'm going to put my wide receiver 1 against Deontay Banks or Cordell Flat every single time. This practice in particular, they had Paulson Adebo traveling, which I was very happy to see. I mean, I think that's the best way to handle it, given still there's some uncertainty. Deontay Banks didn't practice on day 2 of the joint practices. Who knows what he's gotten? I just feel like this summer he's he's been inconsistent, particularly with, he gets beat and then he loses his confidence.
Yep, that was a thing we spoke about last year too. It's just, I don't know how you get someone's confidence back like that. I do think that that's one of the great things about a true corner is just part of it is you got to be kind of a jerk. Like you have to, you're the villain. You have to be the villain, and villains are confident. And you got to be, it's fun to be a receiver. It's fun to catch the ball and dance and do all these things, but you got to be the villain and stop them from doing that. And it does seem like Deontay Banks, once he gets his head hanging a little bit, it's really tough to get him to bounce back there. I don't know if the way to do that is, I know that on Tuesday's practice, he had a great play against the run when they brought him on a blitz. It seemed like he was blitzing no matter what, and they just happened to hand it off at that point. And he had a great stop there. Him and Kayvon Thibodeau combined for it. Maybe it's just forcing him to be more aggressive and forcing him to be more physical will help him kind of get back into that mindset. I remember when I played my incredibly high level of football in New York City high school football. I had to get hit before I really cared. I was like, I got to get hit a little bit. I got to get put into it. So sometimes you just got to be kind of smacked into it. And maybe that's something that would help Deontay Banks.
Fingers crossed, because they are counting on him. Now, you and I both saw this. I think when you watched the defense yesterday, I saw it again today. The use of Dane Belton in the slot. Now, Drew Phillips was back from his injury, which was a good sign, but he was on a pitch count. So we did see a lot of 3 safety looks, but that safety position still a little thin. Tyler Nubin left the practice, I think, early on, which, we don't know what he had, because Brian Dable talks to us before, the practices, but just this whole concept of Dane Belton working from the slot. What did you think of that package? I thought, that was a pretty interesting little twist, a nice little wrinkle that Shane Bowen has thrown in, and one that so far in practice, at least, has worked.
Yeah, I love it. You can go back to when Shane Bowen got hired, and I was writing about how Dane Belton should be his Amani Hooker, who he would play as a deep safety, but come down to play underneath zone, who he would line up in the slot and let him work underneath. I think that Dane Belton's a great underneath defender. I think he can play over top, but I think he's a great underneath defender. And his ability to just find the ball and get the ball is impressive. We see him every spring and every summer. We're talking about how he's making these awesome plays and 7-on-7s and how he's always getting picks. And a lot of them come from working underneath. And I think that he's just a player that thrives there. It's not that he can't play deep. He's just really good underneath. And I even spoke with Dane after practice, and he said one of the reasons that he's playing in the slot a bit more is so that they can find ways to get Javon Holland, Tyler Nubin, and Dane Belton on the field all at the same time, because they think that that's one of their best trios of DBs that they have out there. And so getting Dane in the slot, if that's what you got to do to get him there, then do it. I think Dane's comfortable playing underneath as well. We saw him at Iowa. He played that cash position. That's a linebacker safety hybrid. He likes working underneath. He's good working underneath. And working in the slot, in modern football, when you're going one high, working in the slot's not too different from working as the field safety. And so I think that Dane's comfortable doing that already. And so it's a pretty seamless transition for especially Shane Bowen, who has a knack for getting production from safeties with Tennessee.
Yeah, for sure. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about more individual performances. I've got a couple that I know I'm going to rattle off. I know you and I talked about it on the sideline towards the end of the practice, but we'll have that for you right after this. Hey, Giant fans, most people can't name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all in one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy to use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does all the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Monarch makes it simple to review finances with my partner. We can both see our budgets, our goals, our spending activity all in one place. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Trainer. My guest is Brandon Olsen of Locked On Gators, but also of New York Giants on SI. Joins me on the coverage of the Giants' 2-day joint practices, and he is hopefully going to join me this weekend when the Giants host the New York Jets at MetLife Stadium for preseason game number 2. And Brandon, a couple guys we haven't talked about yet, and I feel we have to. Everybody's going to want to know about Jackson Dart. And again, just going back to it, you watched the offensive side of the ball. How did Dart do?
He looked good. He looked comfortable. I feel like every time you watch Jackson Dart practice, he looks a little bit more like Jackson Dart. Like he looks a little bit more confident. He looks a little bit more loose. I do think that both times that I saw him in the Tuesday end of practice red zone drills that they were running, and then Wednesday throughout practice, I feel like he looked more confident running around, making a play with his arms, and just taking the deep shot. He's an aggressive quarterback. He's been that since, I was going to say since college, but since high school, he's been an aggressive quarterback. And that's part of what makes him him. And Brian Dable has openly said, like, I want him to be aggressive. That's what he's supposed to be. We've heard Ben Johnson, the Bears head coach, say, I would rather you throw a pick instead of take a sack. Like, I would rather take that at that point. Well, I still don't get the math of it, but that's what they're now dealing with. Hey, I'd rather you be more aggressive as a passer instead of taking sacks. And so Jackson Dart looks like he's coming a bit more into his own. I do think that part of it's still going to be continuing to learn this offense, which I have no doubt he'll be able to do. It's just, it's still, he hasn't even played an actual game yet. So I do think that that's going to take a little bit of time, but Jackson Dart looks more comfortable, and the more comfortable he gets, the better he looks, in my opinion.
All right, now another guy staying with the offense that kind of is a head scratcher when we talked about him today, Jalin Hyatt. Now, this is a kid who during the spring looked very good, looked like he was focused, locked in, and then he had the injury during the mandatory minicamp. He came back, he was healthy for the start of training camp, developed tightness again, was missed several days of practice. He was back out there, but it's kind of disturbing, and, injury aside, he hasn't really, in my opinion, and you tell me if you disagree, he's got competition really breathing down his neck. He hasn't really separated from his competition. The Giants have some great, or some intriguing, I should say, undrafted free agents. Bo Collins is one, Daquan Felton, obviously, there's some competition there at the bottom. And then you got the veterans, Lil Jordan Humphrey. What is it with Hyatt that he just hasn't been able to kind of cross over to that next level of his development?
I think that part of it is, and I know as a Florida person, I'm just going to seem like I'm being a hater, especially because 15 minutes ago I said, I'm a generational hater. But I think part of it is just coming over from that Tennessee offense. It's fun. It's productive, but it's not good when you talk about translating to the NFL. It's very college style. They abuse defenses in ways that you can't do in the NFL. And so when we're talking about being able to become an NFL wide receiver where you can't just outrun guys or outsmart college defensive backs who are going to make more mistakes than NFL players, it's tough. You need to develop as a route runner. And I do think that the best way to develop as a route runner is by going out there and doing it. And I think that's the way it works with football a lot. Learning a playbook, best way to do it isn't by going to read the playbook. It's by going out there and practicing the playbook. And when we talk about receiver and the nuances of route running, your speed's great, but you're not creating separation with just your speed. There are some guys that can, but Jalin Hyatt hasn't done that to this point. And so I do think that he needs to be able to get onto the field in some way and actually get reps against NFL defensive backs to continue developing, because he's someone that always needed a couple of years of development, if we're being honest. And I mean, we've passed a couple of years now. You got to get on the field and practice and be able to play. And I just don't know what value he holds right now. I do think that maybe he's getting a little bit of a benefit of being a third-round draft pick just a few years ago, and maybe that's going to help him out a little bit. But as far as actually impressing, the best ability is availability. And if you're not out there, you can't be impressive.
Yeah, and he's had opportunities with Malik Neighbors on the sideline, Darius Slayton, who did return, today for the practice, but he was sidelined for a little bit. Wan'Dale Robinson not really used a whole lot. He's had opportunities to seize a spot, hasn't really done it yet. So, something to keep an eye on, obviously. All right, on the defensive side of the ball, let's talk about Darius Alexander. I really like this kid. And, when you were standing next to me when they merged fields, I made the comment about how Darius Alexander was following Dexter Lawrence around, and they were talking after every single play on the field. Dexter was kind of like, I guess, I didn't hear the conversation, but I would imagine based on the gesturing he did, he was explaining stuff, what happened, and just imparting his wisdom on him, which I really like. But what have you seen from Darius Alexander this summer?
I think that especially in day one against the Jets, I thought he had a strong day, specifically against the run. I feel like, just in full disclosure, in the interest of full disclosure, he didn't make a ton of plays against the pass again on Tuesday. But against the run, he had quite a few plays where I wrote down, I was like, oh, Darius Alexander making a play. And so I do think that that's important for him to be able to contribute there, because if you are a defensive tackle, even if you could rush the passer, if you can't defend the run, you don't hold value. And so I think Darius Alexander kind of taking steps as a run defender is helping him. He's got unique size for the position. One of the reasons he fell is just because he's older as a rookie, which I don't think matters if you're performing as a rookie. And so I am interested to see his development, especially with a guy like Dexter Lawrence kind of being able to mentor. I don't want to say mentor, but being able to help him along in this transition to pro football. He did miss a lot of the spring, or all the spring, and so we didn't really get to see him get that developmental work. But even when he wasn't actively practicing, he was still out there mimicking every drill. I remember watching the defensive line hit one of the dummies with the arms hanging out. They were working on their handwork and hand placement. And while he wasn't able to use the dummy and he wasn't able to participate in that way, he was still doing the hand motions. It was just kind of shadow boxing. And so it seems like he's putting in the effort. It's just a matter of will he actually see the fruits of his labor there.
Brandon, we're more than halfway through now the preseason. Where do you see the biggest concerns for the Giants right now?
I think that part of it is in the secondary. I think that the plan right now, or I'll say the hope right now, is that the pass rush will hit home, force quarterbacks to make some errant passes, and the secondary players at corner and safety will be able to make a play on the ball. But I don't really love that approach of just saying, hey, well, we're going to hope the pass rush gets there, because if they don't, then you're going to be in for a tough one. But day one against the Jets especially was a great, ones versus ones, twos versus twos atmosphere. And even when the pass rush was getting there, if the quarterbacks just extended the play, and it seemed like they just threw the ball up and someone on the Jets was catching it. Mason Taylor made an insane catch. We saw Jeremy Ruckert was making catch. We were watching guys that are third stringers on the Jets go out there and just make great catches, which kudos to you, but DBs weren't there to make the plays. And even if they were there, they weren't making the play. And it feels like they've kind of got that reputation of, if I'm a quarterback, if I'm an opposing quarterback, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to be really aggressive against the Giants. Mm-hmm. And until they make me pay, I'm going to keep going out there and doing it. And it does seem like the secondary not super keen on making plays on the ball right now.
Yeah, a little bit better today against the Jets. Cordell Flott was back, got some, I think he was on a pitch count as well, but I'm with you with regards to the depth at cornerback. That was something I mentioned on yesterday's show, how I feel like they don't really have enough. Corey Black's been sidelined, Trey Hawkins was sidelined. Flott was on the shelf for a little bit. He's back now. Banks is on the shelf. So I just feel like there's just not enough depth there. That's one of those positions where you can never have too many guys.
Nope, not enough depth there. It was concerning for me when on Tuesday's practice I saw Donald Fortune working with the ones. Yeah. That's a little scary, not gonna lie. Yeah. And I like O'Donnell Fortune, but I don't want him starting at cornerback as an undrafted rookie. And so that's definitely a concern where if you can't get, even your top guys aren't all healthy, or Paulson and Debo is out there, but you can't get the rest of your guys healthy out there. That's a concern when you look at the depth of this room and you see a guy like Art Green was someone who on Tuesday had quite a few plays that I'll say frustrated me in coverage. I think that there were quite a few plays where they frustrated me, and the rest of your guys aren't healthy. It's just not a good spot to be in right now if you're the Giants. I mean, it's a great spot if you're at the bottom of the roster at corner, but it's not a great spot to be in if you're a Giants fan.
All right, now on the offensive side, other than, we talked about Jalin highlight, but where's your biggest concern on the offensive side?
Honestly, I think right now for me, offensive side, it's just, I want to say the offensive line depth. I think that they've done a good job to address it, but I still think that it leaves a lot to be desired. We have no idea what Evan Neal is going to be when he's actually playing guard in an NFL game. James Hudson has had highs and lows, but too many lows for me to feel comfortable right now. Marcus Mbo's learning to play multiple positions as a rookie, and I generally don't like banking on young players to be high-level contributors right away. So there's guys that I do think can perform and can step up, and there's some that I am comfortable with, but for the most part, there's just too many question marks for depth when we haven't seen Andrew Thomas stay healthy for a full season in quite some time now. Jermaine Illuminor, I'll knock on wood right now, has been relatively healthy throughout his time, but you're one injury away from things kind of going kaput again.
Yeah, it's scary for sure. You can never have too much depth, and it just seems like the position where they don't have enough depth is the one that the injury bug really targets all the time, and then they're left scrambling, trying to figure out how they're going to plug holes. So, all right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Now, we will have more episodes coming up. We'll have more guests for you. Mike Sando of The Athletic is going to be on a future show coming up, as is Emery Hunt. So hope you will check that out. And Giant fans, as always, want to thank you for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen of the day. If you made it your first listen of the day, or if you're just spending time with us, we thank you for that. For your next listen, please check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rodgers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, that'll do it for us. We will see you again tomorrow here on the Locked On Giants podcast.